Yes, sir.
All right, ready? All right. I'd like to call to order this board of the Ottawa County Board of Commissioners meeting. The date is Tuesday, October 12th. Our invocation today is by Commissioner DeYoung, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by Justin Roebuck. Please rise.
Will you pray with me? Heavenly Father, today we ask for your guidance as we conduct the business of the Ottawa County Board of Commissioners. And Lord, we pray for our farm community today as fall harvest is well underway. We ask protection for the men and women of our farm community who are harvesting their crops. And Lord, a special prayer for all of our medical people throughout the county, throughout the state and the nation as they work through this COVID-19 virus. And Lord, we pray for the men and women who serve us in the military, whether local or across the world, that we can have these meetings like this today. We pray for our firefighters and also along with our sheriff's department and our deputies. Lord, we ask that you keep them safe and out of harm's way. In thy name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Justin, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Garcia.
Here.
Mr. Baumann.
Here.
Mr. Zylstra.
Here.
Mr. Dannenberg.
Here.
Mr. Meppeling. Here. Mr. Terpstra.
Here.
Mr. Holtbluer.
Present.
Mr. DeYoung.
Here.
Mr. Kyers. Mr. Bergman.
Here.
And Mr. Fenske.
Here.
Mr. Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Presentation of petitions and communications.
None from us.
Okay, good. And I'm wondering, I see Marcy came. Are you willing to give can you give an update on the search committee, please?
Good afternoon, board. Just want to give a quick update of where we're at on the selection process for a new county administrator. The committee has met twice over the last 2 weeks and put together all the information that we're looking for in the next county administrator. And we've also sent all of our documents over to GovHR, so they will be working on the recruitment profile. And as soon as we have a copy of that, we can share that with you. Is there any questions for me?
Thanks, Marcy. By the way, I just want to add that the committee that we have with the 4 representatives of the 4 quadrants of the county have done a remarkable job in terms of giving us input as to who we're looking for as an administrator for the county in the future. So the next thing on our agenda is public comment. I want to remind everyone who wishes to address the board about the mask mandate that short, to the point opinions have been the most useful to all concerned. While nothing is certain, it does appear as if a vaccine for the younger age group may be considered and approved by the end of this month. which would mean that the mask mandate for elementary students would terminate at the Christmas break. In the meantime, funding has continued to come in from Lansing to our health department, and new bills have been introduced to give the Board of Commissioners authority in this area in the future. Whether that is a good idea or a bad idea is something that should be debated in the state legislature, which controls the statutes at issue. Until the law is changed, there's nothing for this board to do one way or the other on the issue. To begin with, we will allow all the people that are here to make comments. They can make comments right up the front. At the end, we will allow 10 Zoom calls to make public comment as well. So who is first?
First, we have David Barnowski.
David?
My name is David Barnowski. I live in Port Sheldon Township and West Olive. I dare say you all know my name and what my position is on the mask mandate without even hearing me speak, but I support the health department. I started coming to these meetings before the mask mandate was an issue. I'll probably be here after because I'm trying to learn your role in government. Over the weekend, I attended 2 different rallies, meetings, whatever, in support of or wishing to express appreciation. And I hope you will continue to express appreciation for your public health department. They were run by the Smart Science Alliance of Ottawa County, Vote the Common Good, Ottawa County Democratic Party, Ottawa Integrity, and they're affiliated with the Michigan Parents Alliance for Safe Schools. We didn't organize quickly, but we're organized now and we still support public health.
Thank you, David.
Next, we have Sylvia Rohde.
Hi, my name is Sylvia and I live in Allendale. After months of parent advocacy to protect children from the harms of COVID-19 measures, months during which you incorrectly swore your hands were tied, you were given an opportunity to rescind Ottawa's mask order through the budget bill. Instead, you chose to continue to mask our little ones and override the constitutional right of parents to direct the care of their children. Apparently now, you do not need to follow the law because Whitmer says so. Yet in the midst of mask and quarantine orders, your health department, which aligns with Planned Parenthood, advertises free condoms and sexual health services for minors, masks for little people, condoms for teens. The choices of this board are supported by the Democrat Party. It's not hard to see why. You have ignored the Republican-led legislature, aligned with Governor Whitmer, and silenced the voices of conservatives. In our constitutional republic, the voices of all people are valued, not just the voices of the left.
Next, we have Emily Underhill.
Before you start my timer, my daughter is right after mine, so just so you know that.
I just don't know.
Okay. My name's Emily Underhill. Again, I'm from Allendale. And we just want to say that God has the final say, and we want to play our favorite song. Ready, push play.
Who's next?
Next, we have Tim Drosky.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Tim Drosky. I live in Howland Township, my first time here. And I'd like to thank you all for serving and doing what you do. It cannot be easy in these times. I'm sure no one here signed up for all the comments that you've been receiving, and not only here, but say in the line at Meijer or at a restaurant when people come up to you. So it's not easy. I understand that. My dad was a city commissioner in Walker Township, or Walker City, really. I have to say that I would do exactly the same thing that you've done with the mandates if it was 8 months ago. Things have changed so quickly, and I've been vaccinated. I was back in the spring, but if I was to do it again, I would really question whether I want to do that because things have changed. I understand that the entire council here is not against masks nor for masks. I would ask the councilors or the commissioners that are for masks something positive and show the public
Thanks,
the
Tim.
reasons why. Just explain yourself. That'll go a long.
Thanks, Tim.
And that was our first 5, Mr. Chair.
Okay, yeah, keep going. Keep going.
Oh, sure. Next, we have Michelle Muir.
Michelle?
Point 1, 79 of 83 counties in Michigan do not have mask mandates for children. Point 2, the mask mandate violates the Michigan School Code, section 380.1307B. Point 3, the mask mandate violates section 250 of Public Act 87, signed on September 29th, 2021. Point 4, per a recent Mercola article, the bulk of published science shows that masks do not prevent the spread of viral infections. However, per Dr. Mark McDonald, a psychiatrist specializing in the treatment of children and adolescents, one of the worst traumas children suffer as a result of all this fear-mongering is the idea that they may kill their parents or grandparents simply by being around them. Summary, Ottawa County Commissioners, the science is not on your side. The law is not on your side. Unmask children.
Michelle? Who's next?
Lori Grassman.
Hi, I'm Lori Grassman from right here in West Ottawa, so Robinson Township. Where does fear come from? The fear for children and COVID. We are 20 months into the worst pandemic and 0 children have died in Ottawa County, which is the only county we're talking about here. The whole pandemic has 0. How are we scared of 0? We have to mask our children because the data says so. The data, 0 is 0. There is no data. We have to mask them until the vaccine is available to protect them from what? 0? We are supposedly on the 4th wave and it's still at 0, but follow the data, 0. Let alone it is now against the law to even mandate the mask for children, but we don't follow that here in Ottawa County because we rather follow 0 science. 0 science is what we have here. 0 understanding, 0 data, and 0 courage. Follow the data, it's 0. Sometimes people don't want to hear with the truth because they don't want their illusions destroyed. It's 0. The data is 0, the science is 0. Thank you.
Who's next?
All we have this time.
Okay, thank you. All right, the next thing is approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Support. Moved and supported. Comments or questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, actions and reports, consent resolutions. Mr. Fenske.
Thank you, Chair Bergman. I will make the motion to accept consent resolutions 1 through 3.
Support.
Moved and supported. Comments or questions? Justin, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Holtbluer.
Yes.
Mr. Garcia.
Yes.
Mr. Dannenberg.
Yes.
Mr. DeYoung.
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra.
Yes.
Mr. Terpstra.
Yes.
Mr. Meppelink.
Yes.
Mr. Baumann.
Yes.
Mr. Fenske.
Yes.
And Mr. Bergman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Under public hearings, we have none. Action items from planning and policy, Mr. DeYoung.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Regarding email retention, I move to approve the revised email retention and archiving rule policy, second reading.
Support. It's been moved and supported. Sorry, I got waylaid there a minute. Comments or questions? If not, Justin, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Garcia,
Yes.
Mr. Fenske,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Dannenberg,
Yes.
Mr. Terpstra,
Yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
Yes.
Mr. Holfluer,
Yes.
Mr. Baumann,
Yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
Yes.
and Mr. Bergman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Next, regarding the HIPAA compliance policy, I move to approve the revised HIPAA compliance policy. This also is a second reading.
Support.
Been moved and supported. Comments or questions? Justin, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Dannenberg,
Yes.
Mr. Baumann,
Yes.
Mr. Fenske,
Yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
Yes.
Mr. Terpstra,
Yes.
Mr. Garcia,
Yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
Yes.
Mr. Holfluer,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
and Mr. Bergman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Next is the drone purchase policy. I move to approve the drone purchase and usage policy, second reading.
Support. Been moved and supported. Comments or questions? Justin, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Holfluer,
Yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
Yes.
Mr. Terpstra,
Yes.
Mr. Garcia,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Fenske,
Yes.
Mr. Dannenberg,
Yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
Yes.
Mr. Baumann,
Yes.
and Mr. Bergman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Next motion is photography in the county building policy. I move to approve the photography in the county building policy, second reading.
Support.
Been moved and supported. Comments or questions? Justin, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Fenske,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
No.
Mr. Garcia,
Yes.
Mr. Holfluer,
Yes.
Mr. Baumann,
Yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
Yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
Yes.
Mr. Dannenberg,
Yes.
Mr. Terpstra,
Yes.
and Mr. Bergman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Next thing is under appointments from the county clerk register, Mr. Zylstra. Would you
Sure,
take
Mr.
one,
Chair.
please?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to place into nomination the name of Jim Searles, Jan Guadasquez, and Joan Dieters to fill one Democratic Party appointment vacancy on the Board of County Canvassers beginning November 1, 2021, and ending October 31, 2025, for a 4-year term.
Is there a second?
Second.
And you want to comment that there's one?
There is one recommended by the county clerk, Jim Searles.
All right. Comments or questions? Are we ready to vote? All right. When we vote, we have to give a name.
Correct.
Okay,
Yep.
go
So I'll
ahead,
just call
Justin.
the roll and you can state the name of the individual you're voting for. Mr. Holfluer,
James Searles.
Mr. Garcia,
James.
Mr. Dannenberg,
James.
Mr. DeYoung,
James.
Mr. Zylstra,
James Searles.
Mr. Terpstra,
James.
Mr. Meppelink,
James Searles.
Mr. Baumann,
James Searles.
Mr. Fenske,
James Searles.
and Mr. Bergman.
James Searles.
Is nominated or James is chosen.
And the second under appointments, Mr. Garcia.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to place into nomination the names of Lori Bruker, Cynthia Davis, and Loretta DeBoer to fill one Republican Party appointment vacancy on the Board of County Canvassers beginning November 1st, 2021 and ending October 31st, 2025. It's a 4-year term. I believe that the clerk's office is recommending Lori Bruker out of the 4.
Is there a second for that?
Supported.
It's been moved and supported. Would you call the roll, please?
And Mr. Chair, if I may,
Yes.
Lori Bruker is actually joining us today. She is the current chair of our Board of Canvassers. She's just served one previous term. This would be her second full term. And so we would take an opportunity to publicly thank Lori for the work that she's done for us.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Garcia,
Lori Bruker.
Mr. Fenske,
Lori Bruger.
Mr. Zylstra,
Lori Brooker.
Mr. Dannenberg,
Lori Bruker.
Mr. Terpstra,
Lori.
Mr. Meppelink,
Lori.
Mr. Holtfluer,
Lori Brooker.
Mr. Baumann,
Lori Brooker.
Mr. DeYoung,
Lori Brooker.
and Mr. Bergman.
Lori Brooker.
And Lori Brooker wins the election.
Looks like you made it. All right, the last one is Al Dannenberg. Would you take number 3, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I make a motion to nominate and appoint Kim Nagy to the Ottawa County Jury Board representing the Democratic Party for a 6-year term beginning immediately and ending April 30, 2027.
Is there a second?
Second.
And moved and seconded. Comments or questions? Justin, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr.
Sorry.
Fensky,
Yes.
Mr. Baumann,
Yes.
Mr. Garcia,
Yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
Yes.
Mr. Dannenberg,
Yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
Yes.
Mr. Holtfluer,
Yes.
Mr. Terpstra,
Yes.
and Mr. Bergman.
Yes.
And Mr. Chair, I do apologize because I realize that's under our office.
Yes.
So just to clarify.
Yes.
Kim is actually
I assumed that you
replacing.
weren't gonna call all those, make all those motions.
Right.
I appointed people.
No, yeah, that makes sense. I just wanted to let you know, Kim is actually filling a vacancy on the Democratic side of the jury board
Yeah.
that was vacated by Sarah Howard.
Okay.
So Judge Van Allsburg made the recommendation.
Good. Thank you.
Sorry about that.
All right, discussion items, none. Report of the county administrator.
Just a couple things. One, a very brief update on the final quarter update on our 2020-2021 strategic business plan. Obviously, for the strong financial position of the county, we did adopt a budget for fiscal year 2022 last month. So that went through. The DEI strategic plan is complete and includes guiding key performance indicators and domains, and the implicit bias template has also been completed. The Grand River Greenway fundraising goal has been reached. If you recall, we allocated, I think it was $300,000 in, it was last year's budget for that project. So that fundraising is complete. And the county has access to and is engaging in Microsoft Artificial Intelligence and Business Intelligence suite of tools. So some of the dashboard things you see with public health is with the assistance of Microsoft's Business Intelligence tools. So that's just one example. On a slightly different note, I do want to let you know, and I meant to do this at the last meeting. The Ottawa County Equalization Department was honored this past summer to receive the following 3 awards. One, it was the 2021 Department of the Year from the Michigan Association of Equalization Directors. It was also the MAA 2021 Distinguished Assessing Jurisdiction Award from the Michigan Assessors Association for Brian and the assessing staff's work standardizing the Apex code tables. And then finally, Lori Broussard was awarded the Michigan Assessors Association's Education Award for her years of managing our continuing education classes. So kind of one of those departments that runs under the radar, but those are pretty nice awards from their peers. So we should be really proud of Mike and his department on that. The Hudsonville HVAC and roof project is substantially complete. If you recall, that was a $1.7 million project to replace the entire HVAC system. There were long-standing complaints about excessive humidity. And so we've, I think, took off roughly 22 rooftop units, replaced them, I believe, with 6, and also redid the roof. So there's like little minor punch list items remaining, but the units are up and running and working. So I can tell you the employees in Hudsonville are extremely happy that that project is over with. Our ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act Advisory Committee is meeting later this week on Thursday, and they plan to discuss the process by which organizations could request funding for ARPA funds, and also look at what they call the lenses or criteria by which those applications would be evaluated. We're also going to have discussion. We've gone back and forth in terms of do we want to have major buckets or categories by which we would accept applications and recommendations as to how much money should potentially be allocated to each of those buckets. So we're going to have some discussion on that Thursday. At the end of the day, when the ARPA Advisory Committee reaches a recommendation or a consensus as to how this process should work and how applications should be evaluated, we will bring that to the board for the board's approval before we start doing any type of applications, because we do want the board on board with how we're going to do this process and how we're going to evaluate those applications. And then finally, the local unit government meeting is going to be held Thursday, October 21st at 2 p.m. And Travis Williams from Model Communities will be doing a session there on post-secondary degree attainment and workforce development. This is something that we're doing in consultation with Lakeshore Advantage because they've identified access to education as one of the barriers of business growth here in Ottawa County. So there'll be a session on that, again, Thursday, October 21st at 2 p.m., I believe in the main conference room. That's what I have for you.
Question.
Yeah, just a quick question to ARPA, John. So organizations, how are they to know that, they're eligible or to get involved in them? I mean, there's a lot of smart organizations out there already, probably already talking to, but not everybody knows that, there are funds available and that they could very well fall within the criteria.
Right. We're working on how that will be marketed.
Right.
And so that's going to be part of the discussion. The other thing is, and again, this is all in discussion phase, is there's been discussion of, do we just open it up and allow any type of organization to apply individually, or do we want to funnel those applications through, for example, Lakeshore Advantage if it's a business type organization, or through, say, a foundation or United Way if it's a nonprofit organization. Okay. And so that's part of the process that we're discussing to determine how those procedures will be handled.
Okay.
So that hasn't been finalized yet. And that when we get to that, the committee gets to that final stage, then that process will be brought then to the board, for your approval.
So we would see something before the actual marketing of the funds.
Yep. And before any applications are accepted, because we want the board to be in agreement with, yes, we agree with how this process is going to happen.
Okay.
And we agree with the criteria by which we're going to use to evaluate these applications.
Right. I think when I talk to folks, I mean, obviously the criteria is one of the big things. And two, there are organizations that are small enough that have not heard about it, that, I think if we get to that point, when we get to that point, that, spending resources on the marketing effort itself, I think is very worthwhile, just to make sure we get equitable distribution of ARPA funds throughout the county.
Understood.
Thank you.
John, a couple of questions.
Sure.
Have all the guidelines been established by Washington as to how those funds can be used?
Not the final.
Not the final ones.
That's been.
So it's still moving and it's still fluid then?
Yep.
Going back to the question of when the board will be informed, once the process has been put in place, will that be going to the Finance Committee, Planning and Policy before it comes?
Our idea was to bring it to the Finance Committee and then to the board.
Okay, good. And how about a timeline? Is there a timeline, at least a tentative timeline out there? This process?
My hope would be this year. I mean, the thing with ARPA, we have to commit funding by the end of 2024 and spend it by the end of 2026. So there's also been discussion as how quickly do you start the process and start spending the money? Because what if Congress, for example, passes legislation to fund other types of infrastructure where we could use that money rather than ARPA money? And so that plays into the timing. The other thing that ARPA does is it allows the county to recoup lost revenue due to COVID. And it looks at lost revenue in calendar years 2020, 2021, and 2022. Well, we're not going to know what our lost revenues are in 2022 compared to, I think it's the years 2016 through 2018. We have to compare it to 2022 with those previous years. We're not going to know that for at least another year. And so, that may dictate the pace by which we spend the money. But again, a lot of this depends. We have a lot of different groups at the table, as Joe knows. And so it depends on how those discussions go. But it would be great if we could get something to the board by the end of this year, hopefully, maybe very beginning of next year's. Here's the process. Do you agree with it? And if so, then we can kind of start that.
I think it's important also that, Doug, if you know of individuals or groups that are looking for an opportunity, certainly to get those people to John or part of it.
Yeah, and again, part of that discussion will be how do we market this or make this known to the community and to those groups?
Because I've got several groups also that have approached me, and any you other commissioners, if you have groups that have approached you as well, be sure to get those names to John so that they can be contacted when we actually have those guidelines. Anything else, John?
Nope, that's it.
Just a quick question. Where are we with the Family Justice Center? This has been a long process so far.
We're in the validation stage, which means they're doing much more significant design work on that. So for example, we had a discussion, not to get into the weeds too much, on the type of roofing structure, steel structure, and mechanical systems. And so they present you with some pros and cons and costs for those different systems. So we're getting into that stage. The building authority is meeting tomorrow, I believe, to begin the financing to adopt some resolutions declaring its intent to issue bonds. We're hoping to finalize the validation stage by the end of this year. And when we get to the end of the validation stage, that's where we say we can build this building at a target cost of X. And if that fits within the budget that the board has established, then we would give them a green light to do that. If not, then we have to look at the scope of the project or take some other options on that. So I'm expecting that we would, be coming to you, by the end of this year is what we're looking at with here's the target cost for this type of building. And, we've had to make some design changes to that to fit the budget. You may or may not recall when we were our first stab at this was a 72,000 square foot facility. We've pared it back to about 55,000 square feet to make sure that we've eliminated really any wants and try to maximize covering all the needs. So obviously that might not make everybody happy with what ends up there, but we're trying to have a building that meets the budget and meets the needs, not only for the current time period, but for the future as well. So we should have that program to you by the end of the year that says, here's what we are proposing to build. Here's the target cost to do it. And assuming it's within the budget, that's where the green light would be given. And then construction would start late spring and be about 18 months of construction.
Anyone else? Comments or questions? Thanks, John.
Thank you.
The next thing is general information, comments, or meetings attended. Anyone?
Chair.
Yes.
Yeah, I've been really impressed by just the last 2 days, seeing the amount of public comment emails that are coming to our public comment mailbox. I think that's up on the website now. I think that's where people are seeing that box. I just kind of want to have a question, like, where are those emails going to go? I mean, there are public comments. So for me, at least, I like to see them in a public place. Ideally, I'd love to see them in the packet for next business meeting. So folks who are making those public comments can know that their comments are indeed coming to us. I mean, obviously, up till now, I think every email that I've seen from public comment also has the individual commissioners tagged. But if you just send an email to public comment, I do think that, that should be in the packet for the next business meeting. I don't know if there's any comment on that.
John, you mentioned earlier something about that you're looking at, trying to put together.
We're trying, and Justin can fill in where I've left gaps here, but we're trying to come up with a a better, easier, more permanent system on this to address what you've said. So we're looking at, we just met on this earlier today, of using IT and Qualtrics to create a public comment form, really right on our website, putting your name, your jurisdiction where you live, and then your public comment. And then Qualtrics would do its magic behind the scenes to be able to compile all of those public comments, and those could be sent to the board members as one package so that you could see all of the different public comments. We're trying to do it in a way that takes the least amount of steps and effort, frankly, to do, because it's something that would be going on, for quite a bit of time.
Right.
So, and if we do that, we would then really get rid of that public comment email address, because all public comments, then they could just go to the website and put it in
Right.
that
I
way.
mean, that makes sense. I think, my concern is simply that if you're making a public comment, you expect to see it in a public place, and, the Qualtrics and, what happens on the tech side is one thing, but making sure that folks who do choose to use public comment instead of coming here or using Zoom are seeing their comment in a public place.
And that's up to the board. I mean, we can do it where those public comments are, because I think right now, and now I'm probably treading on Justin's territory a little bit here, is the names of those that speak appear in the minutes of the board meeting, so they know there.
Right.
And with this, that would still continue, and then the actual public comments would be sent to each of the board members. Now,
Okay.
whether
Yeah. Like I
the
said,
board as a whole then wants all of those, distributed as part of the packet, for example.
Right.
I guess that's up to the board to.
Okay.
to
I
decide.
guess my fellow board members can make their own, weigh in on this, but I definitely favor that, if you're making a public comment and you're at the podium, we obviously see you. And if you're on Zoom, we obviously hear you. But if you're making a public comment through, whether it's public comment at myottawa.org or through the new box, that I definitely think that not only the commissioners should be seeing that, but, the general public should be able to see that as well. So,
Yeah,
I know we can put that on
to the board, how
a
they
planning and policy, how we want to work that. But again, if we're going to have a public comment, whether it's a window Qualtrics or whether it's just an email box, for me, that it doesn't show up in public doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So, I mean, I understand where if folks are emailing public comment and CCing individual commissioners, well, we can respond to the email because it's addressed to us. If it's a pure public comment, things similar to the way it works here, it may not work the same way, but I do think that, folks making public comment via email or through a box should be able to see that in a public place.
All right. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned about that.
Okay.
Personally, I'm concerned about people making a public comment, attaching their name or address, anything like that, and other people take that and maybe twist it out of perspective or something, or.
But if the full email is there, I
Even
wouldn't.
try to reach out to that person if you don't agree with them. So I think we need to be real cautious. I like the idea of putting public comment out there, but when you start attaching people's names and addresses and even phone numbers, we need to be real cautious of people's privacy too.
No, I get.
What you're talking about, John, though, is just the area that they're from, right?
Yeah,
And their
the
name
form we were
and-
looking at having Qualtrics put together would have the person's name, their city or township, so not street addresses,
Right.
John Doe from Spring Lake, and then his comment. And leave it at that.
Yeah, I think that respect privacy, but at the same time, gets it out in the public. Sorry about that, Randy.
Mr. Chairman, one concern I would have that I would want to voice about that is the searchability on Google afterwards. Whereas somebody making a public comment or somebody on a Zoom call, you can't Google that name 5 years from now and see that. But if it's going to be in something with Qualtrics where it's searchable or it's a record, what I would be concerned about is then that could come up and like you said, it could be, whatever. I mean, it's a privacy thing. I don't know that I would be 100%, as long as if it's not searchable, through Google, then I
Well,
think, you know.
all I'll say,
Justin?
I'm not an expert on searchability, but I do know that whether it's an email to public comment at myottawa.org or whether they submit a comment through Qualtrics, it's a public record, so someone could submit a FOIA request saying, I'd like to see the public comments from such and such a date, and we would have to release that.
Correct.
That information.
And I think one of the advantages in the Qualtrics system too is right now we're kind of at this challenge where, some folks are emailing one commissioner and maybe that was intended as a public comment. Maybe it's a constituent issue, which obviously we would classify differently, or maybe some are emailing all of the commissioners. Some are using public comment at MI Ottawa. So one of the advantages in this system at least would bring it all together. And that way you would be able to get a digest essentially of everyone who gave public comment. And that could easily be amended to attach to, the minutes of the meeting or a packet prior to the meeting, anything like that. But there's options there.
I mean, I would definitely appreciate that. I mean, sometimes you would get emails that are addressed to all 11 of us that are definitely a pure public comment. Here's how I feel about an issue. And sometimes you get a question addressed to all 11 of us in the form of a question. And sometimes you get an email directly, just you alone, and it's a question. And then if we can kind of bucket it a little bit, then I think as commissioners, we know how to respond to our constituents a little bit better. So that's been the struggle for me, is that I see an email that looks to me like a public comment with a statement, of position, and it's addressed to all 11 of us. I treat that differently than if someone asks me a question that's directed just to me, right? So.
Right.
And it seems to me, and I'm a little cautious here because when I hear your public comments, I'm talking about the public addressing the Board of Commissioners regarding agenda items on the agenda. Where I don't know if we're now talking where the public can go and just make any comment anytime about anything. So I guess I'm a little confused here. So are we talking about public comments for the board members' attention regarding items on the agenda?
Well, they could really write it would be really about anything, just like at an in-person meeting here. The people here can make a public comment about any issue they want, whether it's on the agenda.
Right, at that point, though, they are addressing the board.
Right.
Right. So I'm not, sure whether we're just talking about a blank box, where they can go and just make any comment anytime, or.
Well, I know there've been.
I guess where I'm going to, that it sounds to me like we may need some further discussion in planning and policy and put some guidelines in place, because I don't know if I want to open it just to the whole world from anywhere and everywhere to make a comment about my gray hair or my boots or whatever.
And we can discuss that at the next committee meeting. Just to clarify, Randy, if it's Qualtrics, it's not really searchable within Qualtrics. If it's posted online, then yes, it would be.
All right.
Just a quick note, Frank. So City of Holland has a public comment email box, and they do the same thing. They post it to the next business agenda packet. But in there, they say, this is public comment. It will be posted in the packet for the next meeting. So if you're making a comment, it's going to end up there. So if you don't want it to end up there, then obviously you wouldn't use that method. So I think as long as folks know I'm making this comment, I want it to show on the public record. And if I don't, I'll, email or call separately. So.
Okay, I think planning policy, you got it, right? Justin, you got it? All right, good. Okay, good. Anything else on general information, comments, or meetings attended? If not, we'll go to public comment on Zoom. You have anyone on Zoom?
Currently do not have anyone on Zoom,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
There's one more in the audience.
That's right. So we have
Okay.
Donna Mooney.
Okay.
Afternoon, I've been here before. My name's Donna Mooney and I'm in Georgetown Township. For those who are listening today, I'd like to say ottawaimpact.com. That's ottawaimpact.com, as well as the Great Lakes Justice Center. I hope everybody goes out there and donates and signs up to be with those folks to help them in their efforts with the lawsuits against the commissioners as well as the health department. Mr. Van Essen, I have something particular I'd like to say to you.
You know what? We're not doing any of those kinds of comments here.
Well, he's not an elected official, you are.
Doesn't matter.
And all of his these are
You know
public
what?
comments that he's put out. I'm not allowed to comment on his public comments. Is that what you're saying?
We're not picking on anyone.
Oh, I'm not picking on him. I'm just
Well, it sounds
commenting
like
on
it.
something that he put out here. So I would advise all of you to maybe even on your institutional attorney to speak.
Mr. Chair, we
Okay,
do
thank
have
you.
one Zoom comment as well.
You have one on
Um,
Zoom?
Yeah, it was going back and forth, so it might be technical difficulties, but this individual
Okay,
was here
all right.
before. Shelby Visser. And let me see if we can. All right, Shelby, can you hear us? You may have to unmute yourself.
Shelby, can you hear us?
Still muted here.
Hello?
Hello? You have 1 minute, Shelby.
Okay, thank you. Shelby Visser, Olive Township. I just want to say this past year, you guys have decided to try and take over our job as parents. You're trying to tell us what's best for our kids, and we're just sick of it. Our kids are being punished in ways that we haven't even seen the full extent of yet. And I'm not even talking like the physical task of having to breathe through 2 layers of fabric all day. I'm talking about the emotional and the physiological effects of this when they can't see the facial expressions of their teachers and fellow classmates. You guys just don't have this power. As someone already mentions, you don't have the law on your side, you don't have legislature on your side, and you don't have parents. Recognize the power that you do have and quit abusing us. Give us the right to choose what's best for our kids. That's all we're asking. Make masks optional for parents that want it, and the kids that don't and believe it's wrong, let us have the right to choose. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Shelby. All right,
And that's it,
with
Mr.
that,
Chair.
we're adjourned.